Welcome back again to Stay in Your Lane, Triple T Transport. I'm your host, John Maley. Today we have Todd Burk available. So thank you, Todd, for making time in your day.
Yeah, of course. Good morning.
Appreciate that. It's always
Yeah.
nice to have someone of your caliber on the show. Um, Today's subject matter is somewhat near and dear to my heart. So, uh, I've been doing this a long time, and the real question here that I want to pose is if you're a shipper. Okay. Is now the time where you establish a solid network of partners, or are you really establishing a house of cards due to compression and things of that nature? So I'd love to have your take and your perspective. I think there's many factors. I'd love to hear and understand where you're at on this, Todd.
Yeah, John, first of all, good morning. Thanks for having me on. I'm delighted, obviously, to speak to you. It's always great to be able to be on with you. But
Whew, promise, Mom, I wasn't going to cry.
I think your question is really around what partners do you need to have based on your network, based on your needs. I think one of the conversations that was a carryover from previous discussions we've had was around, what's the frequency of the lanes that you may need as a shipper, and how do you establish the partnerships with certain carriers. And my view is it's probably different depending on what your needs are as a shipper, right? So if, as an example, you need to have a weekly shipment from Portland, Oregon to Atlanta, Georgia, that's going to be very different than if you're a shipper that only needs a delivery on that lane once a month. So, and I think there's a lot of variables that go into that. And I would love to hear a little bit about your perspective as a broker. Like, how does that influence whether or not you partner with a shipper, right? Using the example that I just talked about.
Well, for example, if we use the Portland, Oregon to Atlanta, Georgia, you're talking about a lane once a week versus once a month.
Yeah.
So when you present something like that to me, when it's weekly, it becomes more consistent, and it can be something that we build on and establish routine with maybe a specific provider to bring a higher level of service, to bring a higher level of commitment, to basically, from our perspective, we want to build routine and consistency for our carrier base. That is more important to us than profits, price, because we get a higher value there. We get a higher commitment value with our carrier base, and we're able to provide even a higher level of service. Avoid some fluctuation in market pricing due to consistent volume.
Right.
When you go to it one time a month, then it's 12 a year. To us, it's more of a spot need.
Right.
Okay, where we wouldn't want to engage in a low cost drive out scenario where, hey, you need service, right? And so does every other shipper out there with anything time sensitive. So, you're going to get what you pay for. If it were in the spot market, you're going to, get maybe the lowest rate, and you're more than likely going to get the lowest service level. So, depending on, whether you have chargebacks in place, customer service likes the phone calls and complaints because they have orders that aren't being filled. You're losing shelf space. Now if you're a shipper that ships toilet tissue from Portland, Oregon to Atlanta, Georgia, put it on the rail, right? You put it on the
Right.
rail, and it'll get there whenever it gets there. As long as there's plenty sitting somewhere in inventory, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I think you have to look at, from our side, what is it your need is. We want to understand what's the need from a servicing level, and what are our parameters from the level of service. Is it, hey, we've got a 4 a.m. and it needs to be there at 4 a.m. and how often? So frequency becomes the issue for us. Those are all things that determine where we're going to come in at a price point and how we price it. So 12 times a year what kind of commitment really is that between partners? It's not much. So I think to your point, that is the type of business we operate, and we try to educate our shippers as to to what their ask is.
Right. So, John, in a scenario like that, I mean, just talking through that, I mean, it's my view that you need to have a good complement or mix of partnerships, right? So, I think the question that I would pose and what I would sort of look for your view on is, so in that example that there's only, it's called, let's call it time sensitive, once a month shipment. It doesn't sound like that necessarily would be a long-term partnership, so to speak. And so, it sounds like maybe having going to a spot market in that case might be a better solution. So therefore, you wouldn't have a long-term partnership with the broker in that case. But what is that tolerance? I mean, what is the what would be the frequency that would dictate a partnership? And in your view, how would a shipper, utilize, for example, a partnership with you, and then enhance that by having another partner do those spot shipments?
Well, I think we can do both. Just to give you a triple T perspective, we can do both.
Yeah.
But I think there's an inherent value with us, or with our ability, is to recognize what the ask is. Now, if you're doing more business with us and that's a cherry basically on the top, not a big deal, right? But if you reach out to me in that lane for the fall between Labor Day and 2 weeks before Christmas, that's going to be a premium price you're going to pay in that spot market.
Sure.
So if you're a shipper and you're chasing the bottom, in the spot market, then when it comes back up, you're going to be paying the premium, and you still don't have consistency in your network, right?
Yeah.
You have no commitment to it. So we can commit to getting it done once a month. Your price is going to be a little higher to achieve the service level that we're looking for, because it's going to take more focus and more time for us to vet and to put the right people in place for a once a month commitment. Whereas a once a week commitment, there's consistency there.
Yeah.
So I think for us, the line is, if it's less than 50 times a year, we're going to look for trying to provide you a longer term price. If it's less frequent than that, then we're going to make a commitment and review and work through pricing as a partner.
Yeah.
To keep you off of the spot market.
Yeah.
From a spot market service perspective and a spot market consistency perspective.
All right. Understood. You brought up a good point. I'm curious sort of what your perspective on this. And, part of the benefit for me, at least for being on calls like this, is to really talk through sort of the changing dynamics in the marketplace. And you sort of intimated earlier, talking about how price and price volatility is impacting sort of that relationship. I'm curious, John, like over the last probably 90 days in particular, how have you seen fluctuations in price, cost per mile, in available, carriers in the marketplace?
I would say capacity has loosened due to a reduction in overall volume. I think there's been a shift where, shippers were providing, freight as quick as they possibly could to their customers that were ordering. And I think you saw a change from a just-in-time shipping and receiving model from a buying perspective, from the customer's end, not the shipper's end, their customer's end, to a just-in-case inventory model. So when you saw that major shift, and so they were not only buying for what they needed immediately, they were buying to try and build inventory, and it was going out as fast as it was coming in, right? Mm-hmm. And they were trying to buy for future needs, which they hadn't really had to plan before. So we got into a just-in-case inventory model, and I think things have slowed down on everyone over the past 90 days. I think it's pretty safe to say that we're headed into the recession from here moving forward. I'm pretty confident in saying that. We're seeing interest rates skyrocket. We're seeing fuel skyrocket. We're seeing consumer confidence plummet across. I think we're going to end up positive this year, but I think all of those things are going to impact the market capacity. I think we're going to see attrition over the next 12 and 18 months at sometimes an alarming rate as we get into this. I think the people that are not financially able to sustain this are going to drop out. But I think overall shipping volumes are much lower. So now it's, I think that we're seeing that people are moving inventory and doing what they have to try and get as light as they can going into the third quarter.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that perspective. And I guess the other part of that equation is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but obviously, gas and diesel prices have gone up considerably in the last 90 days. There's been a lot of dialogue. You look online, you see a lot of information around that. Certainly these owner operators, have a significant impact, but larger enterprises obviously plan for these types of things, or at least attempt to. What's your view on sort of the impact as a result of increased fuel costs?
That's a great question, Todd. Now I know why I always ask you to be on all these. To us, the impact is going to force the less funded owner-operators that were living in the spot market, per se, that don't have relationships established, which I think a lot of drivers left their large company roles and chose to go after the spot market revenue over the past 12 to 18 months, right? So now they're going to be looking for shelter. The issue is most of them are going to have expensive equipment, maybe overinflated equipment pricing that they're in, that they're going to have to get out from under. And they're more than likely going to want to lease on or to a larger company, or they're going to sell off and just become a company driver for a larger company. I think that shift is going to be happening over the next 6 and 12 months again also. I think that's a normal thing in our industry.
So you're saying a lot of operators have gone from working for a steady company out on their own, sort of becoming an owner operator, and because they're capitalized on whatever for their tractor and trailer, that that they're probably going to look to, since it's not as lucrative doing spot buys, so to speak, then maybe go back to working for a company instead.
We do believe that that's going to happen, or they're going to lease to try and find shelter from the overhead costs, from the fuel costs, from the insurance costs. That's the normal shift. And I think for us, over the road is always the toughest capacity from a driver perspective to fill. So if that helps, that's what we see normally as a natural shift, a migration.
Yeah. And so when that happens, John, when that shift happens, how does that have an impact then on the spot markets? Is that, so then does the capacity spot markets then become dry? Does it dry up, or does that have an impact on pricing?
I think the spot market dries up for the most part, right? Or becomes much reduced rates are what force that.
Continue watching on the next episode of the Stay in Your Lane podcast.